Hello everyone, this is part 17 of What If Naruto Had a Proper Teacher, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Naruto and Sasuke arrived as fast as they could. Sasuke's Sharingan was whirling madly with anticipation. He was finally going to fight his brother. Sasuke had been longing for this fight ever since the massacre, and it spurred him on to even greater speeds. Naruto was almost just as eager, but for very different reasons. His friends were in danger and he needed to help them. Itachi felt the two powerful chakra sources as they drew closer. Fallen leaf shinobi were all around him. He had taken pains not to kill them, but he could not look as if he was showing mercy, and so numerous broken bones and life-threatening injuries were given to the leaf shinobi. If a medical nin could get to them in time, they would be fine. Itachi hated leaving so much to chance, but he had limited options. Itachi left the leaf shinobi and dashed toward the chakra signatures. Sasuke saw him and swiftly launched a barrage of shuriken. At that range it was child's play to avoid them despite the incredible speed and power behind the throws. Itachi dodged to the side only to see Sasuke use a kawarimi on the tiny object. It reminded him eerily of Shisui's mastery of the substitution technique. Though his friend was better known for his skill with the shunshin, what many opponents never realized was that he used the two in conjunction to lethal effect. While it was swift, the chakra spike was easy for Itachi to read, and he responded with a genjutsu to ensnare his brother. Sakura was skilled at genjutsu, but she was no Itachi. That being said, between practicing against Sakura and the built-in natural advantage of having the Sharingan himself proved to be sufficient to repulse the foreign chakra attempting to manipulate his senses. Itachi widened his eyes slightly in surprise at Sasuke's skill even as he dodged Sasuke's Chidori Senbon. Sasuke had not come alone, and his comrade had created dozens of clones. Several lashed out with futon, shinkugyoku, wind-release vacuum bullets, filling the air with tiny pellets of death. Itachi himself used the body substitution technique to get behind Sasuke. Itachi barely had time to block the powerful elbow strike to his head. Itachi was pushed back by the blow, which prevented Sasuke's follow-up kick from striking. Itachi's estimation of his brother's fighting abilities went up a notch, but he did not let that show on his face. Foolish little brother. Itachi was not allowed to finish as Naruto clones dashed forward, striking at him with drawn katanas. The Akatsuki member danced between the clones with apparent ease, but in reality it was actually not quite so simple. The clones worked in conjunction with each other, presenting near impossible to escape from attack combinations. Only Itachi's razor-honed senses and abilities allowed him to avoid harm. His first sentence had not even been completed when Sasuke added in a barrage of his own shuriken to the mix, completely missing all the Naruto clones but honing in unerringly on Itachi. Itachi created a clone as a distraction and then took a deep breath as he struck out with Kaiten, Gokakyu no Jutsu, fire release, great fireball technique. Itachi's skill allowed the massive fireball to be larger, hotter and faster than normal. Itachi sensed Sasuke's chakra spike before a wave of water slammed into his jutsu, nullifying it completely. Through the steam, a pair of wind-infused kunai sped toward him with impossible speed. Itachi managed to dodge both and saw the ninja wire attached to them. A split second later he saw a wave of air bullets also screaming toward him. With not enough time to even use the body substitution technique, Itachi contorted his body to take the least amount of damage possible. He was mostly successful as only 2 bullets managed to graze his skin. The wounds would not hinder him, but it was first blood. Itachi realized he would not be able to have a leisurely conversation with Sasuke at all. The elder Uchiha brother beat a hasty retreat away from the battlefield. Naruto and Sasuke chased after like he had planned. After gaining a bit of breathing room, Itachi went on the offensive. 2 of his clones dashed forward, beginning a swirling melee with the Naruto clones. The real Itachi used genjutsu. While not as impactful, if he had been able to make eye contact, it was still enough to capture the clones in it. Their perception of the battlefield changed to Itachi's liking, and soon they were more of a hindrance than a benefit. Itachi let out a mocking laugh. Send your friend away, Sasuke. You are embarrassing our lineage. Sasuke snarled but did not respond. The real Naruto closed his eyes and dissipated all of the clones in the area as well as the nature chakra-filled one. It was Naruto's final clone filled with nature energy, which meant he had only had 5 minutes of senjutsu to end the fight in. He kept his eyes closed and pounced with speed that not only matched Itachi Uchiha's but surpassed it. Itachi's Sharingan allowed a form of precognition that prevented him from having his body be pummeled by the senjutsu-infused Naruto. Itachi sensed that he could not even block a blow without his arm being shattered, such was the strength of Naruto's blows. Not only were they strong, but they were also coming in at nearly blinding speed. Itachi couldn't keep this up for long, and an ache began to develop inside his chest. Instead of trying another frantic dodge, he used one of his trump cards. Susanoo. Itachi intoned and red energy surrounded him, forming a skeletal construct. The construct's bone blocked Naruto's punch. Uzumaki dashed backwards, uncertain of this new jutsu. The Susanoo bone had actually been cracked by the blow, and Itachi allowed more of his chakra to add flesh and armor over it. Itachi called out to his brother, "This is the secret of our clan, foolish brother. This is the power of the Mangekyo Sharingan." Naruto had a time limit on how long he could use nature chakra and didn't waste any time in charging back into the fray. This time he used a senjutsu-up-powered Rasengan and charged in. Sasuke added in Chidori Senbon, however he did not expect it to be effective, and he was not wrong. The armored Susanoo didn't have a scratch on it as they pelted it. Naruto's Rasengan would have been far more dangerous, but Itachi allowed the Yata no Kami, Yata Mirror, to take the blow. The shield negated any attack, and even the power of Naruto's Senjutsu Rasengan didn't make a dent in it. Immediately seeing the attack fail, Naruto drew his katana and pushed wind-natured chakra through it and sliced out at the shield. No effect. Safely behind the Susanoo, Itachi continued to speak. "I told you to find me when you had eyes like mine. Do you know why? I wanted your eyes, little brother." Madara Uchiha stole the eyes from his little brother, and it granted him even more power. "What am I supposed to do with your weak eyes, brother?" Itachi needed Sasuke to understand the power of transplanted eyes. It would be a final gift to his brother. Sasuke bit back a retort and instead flashed through the hand seals for Chidori Iso, Chidori Spear. The spear slammed into the Itachi's Susanoo but failed to pierce through it. Sasuke snarled and threw out one of Sakura's specially designed kunai that acted as its own storage seal. The kunai struck Itachi's Susanoo and thousands of gallons of water splashed out. Raiten, Jaibushi Dano. Lightning release. Massive electromagnetic murder. Lightning poured out of Sasuke and into the water that Itachi's chakra construct was drenched in. Itachi flinched from the chakra drain, the attack amplified by the water sent waves of Raiten chakra coursing through his Susanoo. Itachi nearly fell to his knees and barely brought the Yata mirror around to block a thunderous kick from Naruto. Itachi slashed out with the sword of Totsuka. He had no desire to actually use the weapon to trap either Naruto or Sasuke, however the fight had to look real. Sasuke and Naruto both dodged the flickering weapon. With unspoken communication, Naruto uses a shunshin to appear next to Sasuke and wildly overpowered a futon, Daytopper, wind release, great breakthrough. Sasuke at the same moment used one of the advanced Uchiha Kaiten techniques. Sasuke had uncovered the ancient scroll from the Uchiha clan compound and had worked hard to master it. Kaiten, Gunkyu, fire release, great blaze ball, roared out of Sasuke's mouth. The heat of the flames warped vision around it. The jutsu was said to be twice the temperature of any other Kaiten jutsu. The combination attack roared and slammed into Itachi's Susanoo. The heat turned all plant life still in the immediate vicinity of Itachi to ash. The combination of futon and Kaiten would have overcome any Suiten jutsu, such was its heat and power. The Yata mirror absorbed the brunt of the attack and neutralized the raging inferno of death. However, all the parts of Itachi's Susanoo that were not directly behind the mirror burned away. Itachi's body was racked in his pain as he reformed the rest of his Susanoo in the aftermath of the attack. Itachi was impressed with his little brother. Very few Uchiha ever learned such a difficult and draining technique. Despite the pain, Itachi kept his voice even. "Without the power of these eyes, that would have killed me, little brother," Itachi taunted. Sasuke was breathing hard from the last attack. Both Naruto and Sasuke were trained by Kakashi and they could see the reality of the fight clearly. The mirror made Itachi invincible, but it could only point in one direction. If they could strike with enough power from multiple directions, they could break apart the armored chakra construct and then finish Itachi off. But time was running out. Sasuke had used a great deal of chakra and Naruto only had a few minutes left of senjutsu. Once that ran out, he would be far more susceptible to genjutsu and could only strike with a fraction of the speed and force he used now. Naruto and Sasuke's teamwork would have to be flawless for the next attack to work, and it was unlikely they would get another chance. Sasuke grimaced and took a soldier pill for the needed stamina and chakra replenishment. Break. Obito Uchiha needed to gather and extract all of the Jinchuriki in order for his plan to work. Iwagakure had committed a large force and most of its best fighters were away from the village. To compensate for this, they had left Roshi of the lava release behind to guard it, which made now the perfect time for Obito to collect the Yonbi. Obito brought with him a few of the modified Zetsu clones. They now looked like perfect imitations of Konoha shinobi. Their purpose was twofold: draw out Roshi and to also ensure the flames of war continued to burn brightly. The man who currently called himself Madara Uchiha watched as the half-dozen Zetsu clones began to cause a ruckus in the heart of Iwagakure itself. Break. Juro Suzumori was reviewing paperwork that normally the Chushikage would be handling. Paperwork was the bane of all Kage. The sheer volume was appalling. His thoughts often wandered back to his eldest son. He wished he could be there with him. Konoha was serious about protecting its allies, and he knew his child would be in over his head if Konoha responded to the attack with Kakashi and his deadly team. Juro's mastery of his clan's jutsu was complete. This meant that when 7 intruders suddenly appeared within Iwagakure itself, he reacted instantly. He shouted out orders to prepare for battle and raced toward the enemy's vibrations. How is this possible? Has Konoha rediscovered the fourth jutsu? Single quote. The temporary leader of Iwa was troubled. He knew based on the movements and weight that it was not Naruto Namikaze. Could only certain individuals use the jutsu? Why attack with such a paltry force? Could this be a distraction? These thoughts swirled as he caught sight of his opponents. 6 of them were dressed as Konoha shinobi. 2 he recognized from the bingo books as experienced chunin. The others he didn't recognize, which meant they were in disguise or were not infamous enough to make into the bingo books. 2 buildings were destroyed and scores of civilians were dead, along with a pair of Iwa shinobi who happened to be in the area. The final member of the attack group was masked and wore Akatsuki robes. Juro coldly analyzed the situation. He couldn't comprehend the situation fully. He knew he was missing something. Anyone could hire Akatsuki. The mercenary organization made no bones about going to the highest bidder. But why would a mercenary be trusted with the secret of their teleportation jutsu? Juro needed no hand seals to direct the earth of the village to rise up and skewer the leaf shinobi. The spikes of rock erupted underneath their feet and tracked their movements. A combination of evasion and jutsu allowed most to survive, but one didn't move in time and the rock speared her through. A moment later and a Fuinjutsu seal exploded from within her. More Iwa shinobi were racing to the fight and soon the leaf shinobi were retreating. The masked Akatsuki hadn't participated in the fight and had evaded everything with ease. More things weren't adding up in Juro's mind. And now Iwa's trump defense card arrived on the scene. Roshi charged in, spewing lava. Suzumori saw the Akatsuki leap directly at Roshi. Lava intercepted him and passed through him. Juro sent a spike of earth where the man would land. The spike also passed through him, and to his amazement the weight of the man's steps altered. It was as if a part of him was no longer attached. Juro was delivered another nasty shock when the man touched Roshi and the Jinchuriki simply disappeared, the air distorting around him. The attack was disturbingly similar to Kakashi's jutsu that slew Maru the Bear King. The Iwa shinobi were finishing off the Konoha nin when they saw their chief defender disappear. They took a step back when the Akatsuki raised his arm, but the Akatsuki merely waved. Space distorted around him and the man was gone. The man was truly gone. He was not using some camouflage jutsu that masked his presence. This was not the Hiraishin no jutsu of the fourth Hokage. Juro would replay the battle 100 times in his head to figure out if he could have done something different to avoid this disastrous occurrence. He had failed the Chushikage and his village once more. The shame threatened to crush his spirit. The only positive aspect of all of this is that Konoha does not have a new teleportation jutsu. The Akatsuki does. And they go to the highest bidder. If we can bring them to our side, we could win this war. Break. If Itachi was healthy and truly intended to kill Sasuke and Naruto, it would have been a close fight. But Itachi was not healthy and he had no desire to win the fight, so his earlier attacks were pulled to avoid a potential lethal accident. But he did need to relay information and ensure contingencies were in place. That meant that he had to allow the pair to break his Susanoo down quickly and get close to both Naruto and Sasuke. Unfortunately for Itachi, the best laid plans could be disrupted by Konoha's most unpredictable ninja. Naruto and Sasuke came from opposite sides. Naruto wielding his chakra-infused katana and Sasuke using Reikiri. Itachi blocked the Reikiri with the Yata mirror and allowed the Susanoo chakra to take the futon-powered blade. It ripped into the armor, the flesh and into the bones of the Susanoo itself. Itachi could see chakra with his Sharingan eyes and saw the blade, which had been reinforced with Fuinjutsu strengthening seals, instantly become infused with exponential levels of chakra. Itachi instantly saw what was happening, but the blade exploded in an instant within the heart of the Susanoo. Futon-charged blade particles sliced through the inner parts of the Susanoo and into Itachi. The metal flew faster than the fastest thrown kunai, enhanced from within with wind, the element of speed. His eyes could see their trajectory, but not even his razor-honed reflexes could avoid them. The metal pierced into him and through him. It annihilated tissue, muscle or bone, the substance didn't matter. Naruto also suffered injuries, but he had been able to direct most of the futon chakra forward and away from his body. Even so, the explosive force of the metal sent some his way, and he now sported a jagged hole in his left thigh. Itachi's Susanoo collapsed all around him. He coughed blood and his eyes were full of pain. Not from physical wounds, but from the bitter taste of failure. He had not been able to share all of the information he wanted. He had not been able to implant the Amaterasu into Sasuke or pass on Shisui's gift. Razor-sharp metal had ripped through Itachi's arm, wrist, 3 separate parts of his lower torso, his ankle and his cheek. His body was a bloody mess, and with the Susanoo gone he was defenseless against Sasuke. Before he could even try to speak or use his perforated body to defend himself, Sasuke's Reikiri exploded into his chest, ending his life. Itachi's final thoughts were filled with regret, but those dark clouds of despair had a silver lining. Naruto and Sasuke were far stronger than he had anticipated. This had surprised him, and he hoped it would surprise Madara. Sasuke looked down at the shattered remains of his brother. The man had ended his entire clan. The man had ruined his life. The man in Sasuke's eyes deserved death 1,000 times over. Emotions filled him. Kakashi had taught his students to suppress emotions in battle, but now that the battle with Itachi was done, he allowed himself to feel those emotions. Yes, Itachi deserved death, but Sasuke's heart remembered his older brother's younger years. The one who would flick his forehead, the one he had looked up to and idolized. Sasuke wept for the boy and not the man that Itachi had become. Instead of joy and satisfaction at avenging his family, he felt sorrow and pain fill him instead. His eyes shed tears and then pain flared in them. Naruto limped over to Sasuke and saw him clutch his face. Sasuke, did you get hit by a final attack or something? Sasuke opened his eyes and looked at his friend. Naruto blinked. Sasuke's eyes, they were different. Kisame had enjoyed his battle with the hidden waterfall Jinchuriki, but underwater she was no match for him, and same had her. The unconscious girl was tossed over his shoulder after he let his Suiten-jutsu collapse. The Takagakure nin were fearful and stepped away from him. The Iwagakure contingent at first tried to bar his path, but Kisame had just grinned, exposing his shark-like teeth. Battered after battle and seeing Kisame hardly even injured or winded, the commander issued a terse withdrawal. Kisame could see the rest of the battle not going in favor of Iwa, and that probably contributed to their decision. Time to find Itachi and report into Leader Sama. Break. Hana had been ravaging the Iwa forces when the signal to fall back came. Hana pummeled one last Iwa Chunin to death before racing back to Shikamaru's command area. As she came closer, she saw the state of her comrades. No Iwa shinobi had made it back there, so why were there so many injured? She barked out, "What happened here?" A wounded Chunin who was still ambulatory answered by simply stating, "Itachi Uchiha." The Inuzuka's blood ran cold. Itachi Uchiha wiped out his entire clan. He was considered the most dangerous missing nin. Hana raced toward the fallen shinobi that looked the most injured. She had originally learned medical ninjutsu to take care of animals, but the skill carried over into healing humans. Choji had a nasty belly wound that without attention would kill him. With her there, it was relatively easy to staunch the wound. She hurried over to the rest, and miraculously no one was too far gone to be saved. The Inuzuka clan head had fought a running battle and was now healing several people. Exhausting was beginning to set in, and she quickly downed a soldier pill. She took a moment to catch her breath and see the rest of the battle. The Iwa force had been decimated. The center of the battlefield still had waves of demonic energy coming from it, however she could see no more Dotonjutsu being used, which meant that the Iwa forces there were dead or scattered. More difficult to see was the opposite flank of the battle where the Takagakure shinobi had been arrayed, but it looked like a messy battle had taken place and then both sides had retreated in relatively good order. She had been told that Naruto and Sasuke had chased away Itachi. After patching Shikamaru up, she said, "We need to help Naruto and Sasuke. They are strong, but this is Itachi we are talking about." Shikamaru shook his head. "We can only send shinobi who are virtually immune to genjutsu, or we'll do more harm than good." Hana looked at the battered remains of Shikamaru's command and realized that very few would be fit to fight. The critical wounds may have been healed, but there had been a battle. With Hana's medical training, she was better than most in detecting and dispelling genjutsu. Hana suppressed a groan from aching limbs. She would leave her 3 nin dogs behind. "I'll go, you and you with me." She had picked out 3 chunin who were better than most in genjutsu detection. Hana had no doubts she and her squad would be utterly destroyed by Itachi if they fought him alone, but hopefully they would be able to provide assistance to Naruto and Sasuke. With her nose it would be easy to track them, however that was unnecessary as large surge of chakra formed and created a reddish chakra construct. "Kami, what is that? Break asterisk." For the umpteenth time Kakashi dodged another vicious strike from the Iwa Jinchuriki. Exhaustion was setting in as Kakashi's body was being pushed to the very limits. The silver lining was that the Iwa forces were withdrawing. The death of their commander and the shattering of their lines had them panicked and demoralized. While Kakashi created some separation between him and the seemingly untiring Han, Sakura sped several of her special Fuinjutsu kunai at Han. A chain of explosive tags appeared around him and continued to explode for seconds later, rocking the Jinchuriki backwards. Sakura didn't let up firing her special weapons and pushing the dark red monstrosity back. In a rage, Han began gathering chakra for a Bijudama, tailed beast ball. Kakashi dashed forward and delivered a powerful spinning back kick that sent Han tumbling over the battlefield. The chakra, however, seemed tethered to him and the Bijudama, tailed beast ball, grew larger. Kakashi didn't want to use his eye, but it looked like he would have no choice. Sakura signaled him back and Kakashi allowed his student to handle it. A tailed beast ball was no easy thing to handle, nevertheless he had faith in her. Sakura tossed kunai around Han and then yelled, "Kekai, yon koatari." Barrier art, 4 parts. Instantly the purple barrier connected the kunai together. On its own that would not be nearly enough to stop a Bijudama, tailed beast ball. But Sakura wasn't done either. She tossed another 4 kunai out in an even wider pattern and repeated the jutsu. And then again. 3 layers of purple barriers were out in seconds when Han completed the gathering of the chakra. The ball of explosive death hit the first barrier and detonated. The barrier was instantly destroyed. This was what Sakura had expected. She had deliberately altered the chakra used in the formation of the barrier to flood the ball with chakra, making it unstable. It took away none of the sheer power of the attack, but it did cause the attack to detonate now as opposed to piercing through the barrier and continuing on. The explosion radiated outward in all directions with relative equal force. This meant that it also struck Han, who was still inside the barrier. The secondary barrier was designed to contain the explosion. It failed in that regard, but it did take some of force behind the explosion off. By the time it reached the third barrier, its potency had shrank, and even though it collapsed that barrier as well, it did no harm to Sakura or Kakashi. Han's transformation flickered. Kakashi instantly used a shunshin to dash forward and drive a Reikiri into the Jinchuriki's backside. The dark reddish chakra held for a moment and then collapsed. Han too collapsed, utterly drained of chakra, both his own and that of the tailed beast sealed inside of him. Relief flooded Kakashi, but also indecision. Killing Han would rob Iwa of one of their Jinchuriki and prevent it from repapering for another 2 years. And while it would likely reappear within Tsuchi no Kuni, Land of Earth, it would need to be recaptured and then their host would have to be trained. And if Iwa wasn't careful, another village might steal the Biju before they were successful. On the other hand, if they captured Han, they could extract the Biju at their leisure and give Konoha another weapon. Alternatively, they could also use Han as a bargaining chip to take Iwa out of the war. These ideas had merit but were complicated by the attack on Konoha itself. Depending on how things went, it might be difficult to keep Han a prisoner while trying to drive out Kumo from their lands. All of this was contemplated within a couple of seconds. Kakashi reviewed his options on last time and made his decision. Break asterisk. Naruto had seen the shift in Sasuke's eyes. He had unlocked the advanced Sharingan thing that his brother had been talking about. With his clones, Naruto could be considered a voracious reader, but there had been no books about higher forms of the Sharingan. He supposed they would classify as a clan secret. Naruto tightly bandaged the hole in his thigh. The QB would eventually heal the damage, but for now it made walking on it nearly impossible. He worried about the rest of the battle, but Sasuke couldn't be left alone right now. He was bleeding from the eyes and his chakra was at critical level. Naruto knew basic field medicine, a bit more than that thanks to his reading, but there wasn't much he could do about chakra exhaustion or figuring out the effects of the Uchiha bloodline. Luckily for him, a trained medical nin was headed directly for him. He saw Hana Inuzuka and 3 Chunin trailing behind her. Hana immediately pushed a burst of chakra through her system and released it to make sure she wandered into a genjutsu. Naruto waved her over. It's the real me, believe it. Hana saw Itachi's body and suppressed a shiver. His body had been nearly butchered, it looked like. Well deserved of course, but still the savagery reminded her of her own recent slaughter of Iwa shinobi. She saw that Sasuke was in worse shape and checked him over. What happened to your eyes? Sasuke responded, not something you can fix. Uchiha bloodline. Hana growled, her patient wasn't being very helpful. Beyond that, Sasuke didn't have significant injuries outside of a case of massive chakra exhaustion. Your part in the fight is done, Sasuke. As it is, I'm surprised you are still conscious. Don't use chakra for the next few days unless there is no other option. Hana turned to Naruto, now let me take a look at your leg. Before she could get very far, they sensed another chakra presence. Kisame Hoshigaki was approaching and saw Itachi's body. Well damn, I didn't think Itachi would actually lose to his kid brother. Instantly everyone was on the guard. Hana took a few sniffs and deduced that this wasn't the real Kisame. It was actually a Mizu Bunshin water clone. He's a clone, she barked out to the rest of the group. Naruto created a host of clones, though all of them also had wounded legs. The Kisame clone, however, didn't attack. Instead it turned and ran away. Naruto looked confused for a moment until Sasuke shouted, Dobe, only shadow clones retain memories. Unless the water clone reports back, the real Kisame won't know what happened. With that, the hobbled clone army chased after the Kisame clone. The Chunin made to follow, but Hana called them back. We have wounded here, we don't have time to go chasing after missing nin. The 2 Chunin prepared a stretcher and placed Sasuke on it. He wasn't happy about being carried, but physical excretion could compound chakra exhaustion. The Chunin prepared to decapitate Itachi for Sasuke and Naruto so they could claim the bounty. Use one of Sakura's stasis scrolls, his eyes need to be preserved, Sasuke ordered. The Chunin cut off Itachi's head and left the body where it was as the group headed back toward the Konoha lines. Break asterisk. Kidomaru groaned as he regained consciousness. He had been caught at the edge of that massive futon jutsu that had decimated the Iwa force. He looked around and saw corpses everywhere. He looked further and saw the Iwa forces in retreat, but the Konoha shinobi not pursuing. He also could not sense demonic chakra. He coughed up blood and forced himself to stand. He hated Konoha with a passion. He had signed up with Iwa for this fight in the hopes of killing some leaf shinobi, and instead the rogue shinobi he recruited were dead all around him, and he himself had almost bought it. He spat blood on the ground and hurried to catch up with the retreating Iwa shinobi. Anko waited patiently for the wary Kumo shinobi to fall into her trap. The useless Fuinjutsu seals that were leaking chakra were creating havoc on the Kumo scouts. Their entire column had slowed while their sensor specialists combed the area trying to determine what was creating the chakra sources. Along the way they had stumbled on some of Anko's traps. Being Sonor shinobi meant that there had been few causalities, but that was about to change. Anko was an infiltration specialist and had suppressed her chakra ruthlessly. Even with her skill she wasn't completely undetectable in a vacuum, but with all of the other chakra signatures in the area she wasn't sensed. 3 Kumo shinobi were carefully disrupting the genjutsu that covered the explosive tags in the ground and were not aware that Anko was already in position. After completing their task they detonated the seals, and it was at that precise moment that Anko chose to strike. She led off with a brace of kunai, firing them through the explosion. Her deadly accurate strikes took 1 Kumo nin in the eye and the other 2 barely deflected the deadly projectiles. As the explosion dissipated, no more kunai came screaming in, instead a deadly Anko charged through the smoke. The first Kumo nin died as Anko powered past his guard and ripped out his jugular with her kunai. Anko struck and moved, gracefully avoiding the blood spatter. The last Kumo shinobi attempted to use a variant of the Magen, Narakumi no Jutsu, demonic illusion, hell viewing technique, taught in Kumo. Not a bad strategy, Anko thought. So far the attacks had all been physical, which could mean that she was vulnerable to genjutsu. Too bad you are fighting a grade A badass like me. Anko easily shrugged off the genjutsu that made her think she was falling up into the sky and blazed forward. The Kumo nin tried to use Kawarimi, but he wasn't fast enough and Anko's foot crashed into his temple, knocking him out. Anko had to move fast before more help arrived. She quickly cut the shinobi's tendons and broke several bones. Even with a medical nin on hand, there would be no way he could help in the coming invasion. Anko then tightly bound the man's limbs and strung him up by his legs into the tree. She then placed several discreet but fairly obvious traps for the enemy nin. When more Kumo shinobi arrived, they would want to save their comrade. The traps would be too simple, so they would continue looking for more, when in reality Anko wasn't going to bother with anything more. How many sensory specialists would waste precious time looking for traps that weren't there? Mission complete. Anko hurried onto her next ambush point. Break. Iruka worried about his wife. He didn't dare express that worry since Anko was quite touchy about her skill as a shinobi. Despite Iruka's recent training, Anko was still far more formidable on the battlefield. In this arena in particular, she was nearly unmatched. Iruka gladly played second fiddle to Anko on this deadly mission. Pride was of no concern. What was of concern was Anko's safety. He loved her, and the thought of her being harmed filled him with dread. Right now he had to focus as his team was about to make a lightning strike at the advanced elements of the Kumo invasion force. The attack wasn't designed to do much damage. Its purpose was to lure the pursuing shinobi into a maze of deadly traps. Snares, pit traps, fuinjutsu triggered explosions, pre-layered genjutsu and vicious counter-attacks would be waiting for them. Iruka and 6 Anbu sprinted across the woodland and opened up Sakura Haruno's kunai scrolls. Each scroll blasted out pressure-driven kunai into the Kumo ranks. Between the 7 of them, almost 300 kunai filled the air. Naruto's academy teacher was disappointed to see little effect. Kumo had been warned about the projectiles, and one of the leading shinobi countered with a futon, repusho, wind release, gale palm, that scattered the projectiles. One of the Anbu ninjutsu specialists launched a Kaiten jutsu into their ranks, but it was dodged, and so far they had done minimal damage to leading Kumo elements. Iruka signaled the retreat and they backed away from the fight. The Kumo shinobi, however, didn't pursue. As commander of this group, Iruka weighed his options. He could try to bait them again, but that could backfire, as by now the Kumo shinobi would have relayed the information back to the greater bulk of their forces. Cautious by nature, Iruka had his team melt back into the trees. There would be more opportunities. Break. The Reikage and the Chushikage were marching together near the front of the formation behind the 500 shinobi scouts they had tasked with clearing the way. Darui and C were close by when they received the message that their scouts had made contact with Konoha forces. The messenger was breathing heavily as he reported. Fuyu reports that Konoha has trapped the way ahead extensively. They are also engaging in hit-and-run tactics. Anbu are in the woods and casualties are expected to be high unless the pace is slowed. The Reikage growled. Fuyu was a trusted jonin, and she was one of the best when it came to reconnaissance. He had never known her to be wrong, and that left him with a decision to make. If he pushed on ahead at full speed like he had planned, his forces would take significant damage. However, if they slowed their progress, it gave Konoha more time to prepare and possibly allow whatever forces they sent to help Takagakure time to return. Thoughts? The Reikage asked his small circle of advisors. He hadn't really been asking Onoki, but the Chushikage advocated for more speed. If they are sending elite units to slow us down, they are desperate for more time. Don't dawdle, push on and crush Konoha. Darui stared impassively at the leader of Iwa. It is not your people who will be dying if we push forward quickly. The leader of Kumogakure knew Daru's thoughts. He would want to slow down. But lives saved now could lead to more lives lost later. C was silent, not convinced that either course was best. As much as I hate to waste lives, I must, the Reikage started to say before Darui interrupted and inclined his head. Lord Reikage, perhaps there is a third option. Our scout teams are skilled, but allow me to lead a kill team against Konoha's saboteurs. We will strike fast and kill them. They are using traps and then sending assassination specialists to kill our sensor shinobi. If we take him out, then the traps can be dealt with safely. Darui watched his leader consider it. Fine, just don't get yourself killed. I'm depending on you to keep this army functioning properly. When we hit Konoha, I'll have no time to lead as I'll be hunting down Konoha's elite. Darui touched the hilt of his blade and dropped to one knee. I will not fail. With a crackle of lightning marking his departure, Darui disappeared and gathered his band of killers. Break. Anko and Iruka's teams had success in slowing down the disarming of the traps and obstacles they had laid out. After several hours, Anko had 19 kills with her solo missions alone. The Anbu squads had only suffered one death and one minor injury, leaving 23 effectives, not including Iruka and Anko. Anko told them, "We're doing well so far, the Kumo advance is slowing a bit. The scouts are trying to be tricky. A group of them are flanking far to the south. They'll probably swing around and try to hunt us instead." Their Kaiten specialist, a blocky Anbu with the designation Komodo, looked at Anko and said, "We'll be ready." Iruka spoke up, "They aren't taking the bait to pursue us into the trapped areas. I think we'll need to hit them hard to provoke them." Anko smiled and twirled a kunai with one of her fingers. "We'll hit them in the nose with half of the group. Iruka, take 6 and continue laying traps in region 22. I want the rest of you to work in pairs and do quick strikes at range. They have been defensive so far, but stay sharp, that could change at any time." Anko and Iruka shared a brief glance before splitting up. As they sprinted through the trees, Komodo drew closer to Anko. "Why is Iruka in charge of the reserve force? He's our best sensor." Anko glared at the masked Anbu soldier. "Are you really questioning me in the middle of a mission?" "I'm questioning your allocation of resources, and I'm wondering if you are allowing your emotional attachments to jeopardize the mission. I really don't have time for this shit. I'll run this the way I want to. I have my reasons for placing Iruka in reserve. He's a Suiten specialist. One of the last ambushes we'll be setting is at the river. I don't want to exhaust him without reason." Komodo nodded and fell back into formation. Anko was pissed, not because she was being challenged but because her reasoning was an excuse. She knew Iruka could handle himself. He was a Jonin after all, but he hadn't been a Jonin for long. She didn't think she could live with herself if he got himself killed, especially if she was the one who put him in harm's way. Break. Danzo en route were nearing the capital and the seat of power of the Fire Daimyo. He tasked Sai and 2 of his best stealth specialists with a critical mission. "I need to know who is leading the Kumo attack force as well as the names of as many Jonin as you can determine." Danzo didn't explain why he needed the data, and his operatives didn't ask. If something were to happen to him, it wouldn't matter anyway, since his plan wouldn't work. It all hinged on the eye he stole from Shisui. Bending the commander to his will would do little if the enemy suspected genjutsu. No, it would not be as simple as a quick confrontation and an easy victory. What needed to happen would require far more finesse. In any shinobi village there were traitors and those who sold their comrades out for one reason or another. Danzo had a list of Chunin and Jonin that could be bought, be it through coin, blackmail, or the lives of the dependents that Root had already secured. Danzo could see how things could come together if manipulated in just the right way. Danzo's hope of victory lay with the attacking Kumo army cannibalizing itself. Failure to accomplish that would lead to a bloody last stand that not even he and his Root could hope to survive. Contingency plans were still necessary, and while he waited for the necessary information, he would need to speak with the Fire Daimyo and prepare the city. Break. Darui knew the makeup of the entire Kumo invasionary force. It didn't take him long to pick a dozen capable shinobi. Half of them were elite combat specialists, a few were sensors, and still others were experts in poison and trap setting. One was proficient in genjutsu and kept their chakra and presence hidden. Darui waited patiently as 2 Konoha shinobi launched a long-range assault on a team of scouts disarming a nest of traps. They were keeping the distance and using long-range attacks. Darui signaled his team and then he moved with blistering speed toward the 2 elite Anbu. Darui ripped his blade from his sheath and descended on the first ABNU. The kunoiki barely had time to raise her tanto before the blade flickered up and slammed into her guard. The sudden hit drove her backward and her partner hastily attempted to intervene. The right arm of the Raikage dodged the counterattack and nearly decapitated the second Anbu. The quick cut had been anticipated, but the raw speed was too much. Instead of losing his head, a nasty gash ripped through the mask and bit into his forehead. The head wound bled profusely, getting into the ANBU's eyes. The initial Anbu had recovered but had other worries as two more Kumo shinobi circled her, one an obvious taijutsu expert and the other speeding through hand signs for a Raiten jutsu. Her instinct was to disrupt the jutsu, but she wasn't quite fast enough and raw electricity poured into her, frying her nervous system. The taijutsu specialist quickly snapped her neck and then turned to help their commander. It was unnecessary as Darui had not let up. After delivering the head wound, he rained down a series of blows that proved to his subordinates just why he was a master in kenjutsu. The Anbu didn't even have time to try to Shunshin or a Kawarimi. His last act was to activate the explosive seals on his body in the hopes of taking Darui with him. Darui leapt backwards as the explosions rocked the area. Konoha is dangerous. They seem to all be ticking time bombs of one sort or another. Daru's kill team had its first success, but he knew the mastermind was still out there. He quickly signaled his men and returned back to the main group of scouts. The genjutsu was layered over the kill squad and he brought down his chakra signature as low as he could make it. Break. Unbeknownst to Anko, she had just lost a pair of Anbu she had tasked to commence the hit-and-run strikes. Even if she had been aware of it, she may not have changed her current course of action. Anko and her squad had used overwhelming force to decimate one of the advance patrols and were in position to hit main body of the scout formation. In total, over 100 Kumo shinobi were moving steadily forward while dozens of scouts reported back and were sent out on missions to remove the traps and clear areas. Time to stir the ant's nest, Anko announced in an upbeat tone. Anko and the dozen Anbu with her advanced at a sprint. When they neared the enemy forces, those with larger chakra pools created clones, of the mud, shadow or water variety. Ahead of the clones, Anko raced forward, behind her streamed the clones and finally the real Anbu. Once they were within long range, Anko shouted, Kuchio's no jutsu, summoning technique. Her bloodied hand slammed into the ground and a massive two-headed serpent appeared. Its thick scales easily deflected the array of kunai and shuriken that had been launched at the Konoha forces. After summoning the massive snake, Anko continued her rapid advance. Her Anbu opened scrolls that let loose a massive discharge of kunai into the Kumo line. The response was the few futon uses that Kumo had moved to the front and used their jutsu to deflect the kunai. Anko eyed them and made a beeline for the futon specialists. The Anbu known as Komodo also picked out a futon specialist and launched Kaiten, Karyuenden, Fire Release, Fire Dragon Flame Bullet, at him. Anko ruthlessly slashed down with her blades. Her serpentine movements were hard to follow and two Kumo shinobi lost their lives in as many seconds. With the futon specialists taken care of, the next payload was launched by Anbu. This time the kunai that were propelled forward had explosive tags attached and Anko quickly used Kawarimi to get some distance from the Kumo shinobi. Explosions rippled through the area. Many Kumo shinobi took evasive measures, but the air was thick with kunai and explosions. Even seasoned Chunin fell victim to the attack. While the attack was devastating, it did not prevent the Kumo forces from unleashing a blistering counterattack. Raiten jutsu filled the air as bolts of lighting and streams of electricity sought out the Konoha forces. The Anbu used the Great Snake as a shield, avoiding the worst of it. Anko was pleased with the attack but knew she would need to do more damage. Every scout she killed would slow down the main advance. Anko used a shunshin to get close to a pair of hardy Kumo nin who had survived the explosive barrage. One started to go through the hand seals for a Raiten jutsu but was interrupted as Anko used Senejishu, striking shadow snakes. The shinobi tried to avoid the venomous snakes but wasn't quite fast enough. His partner lashed out with a chakra-enhanced kick that Anko blocked, with a kunai. The shinobi's leg was impaled and Anko ripped the kunai out viciously, tearing an even larger gash. It took her another second for that same kunai to find its way into his beating heart. Anko relished the danger and combat. It brought our inner adrenaline junkie. Dozens of Kumo shinobi lay dead, but before Anko could continue her slaughter, an opponent erupted from underneath the ground. Anko was wary enough to avoid the Doton, Shinjuzanshu no Jutsu, Earth-style, Headhunter Jutsu. Anko was a little surprised to see a Doton Jutsu used from a Kumo shinobi. It wasn't a common elemental affiliation in Kaminari no Kuni, Land of Lightning. Anko stepped away from her rising opponent. She was a short woman with short dark hair that was peppered with gray. She wielded a pair of short blades and slashed as she rose out of the ground. Anko deflected the blade and then gutted her. Anko's eyes widen in shock as electricity exploded outward from the Raten cage bunchen, lighting Shadow Clone. Her nerves bore the brunt of the electrical shock. Anko's muscles suffered spasm after spasm as she fought to regain control of her body. Anko knew she had little time. Erupting from the ground in front of her was the real Fuyu. Anko vaguely remembered she was supposed to be an A-ranked infiltration specialist. Mitarashi barely managed to get a kunai up to deflect the first Tanto strike. Her normal force wasn't in it and her arm was shoved away and the Tanto struck down toward her chest. Anko's muscles screamed at her as she forced them to move. Unable to fully get away from the blow, she at least managed to avoid suffering a lethal strike. Instead, the enemy's blade struck her shoulder and bit deeply. Anko let her body fall back from the blow and blew a poisoned shard of metal that she kept in her mouth. Anko had long since acclimated her body to the poison so it didn't harm her. Fuyu instantly deflected it, but it allowed Anko another precious moment to regain control of her electrified body. Fuyu came on and Anko countered the chopping blades with another Senejutsu, striking shadow snakes. Unlike her comrade, Fuyu did not fall to the snakes. Instead, her blades whirled and diced the snakes to pieces, barely slowing her advance. Fuck. Anko cursed as she narrowly avoided death with a no-seal kawarimi. Fuyu instantly reoriented on her and slammed her blades together, forming a Reikyu, lightning ball, that closed the distance at near impossible speeds. Anko flattened herself onto the ground, avoiding the attack, but now she was on the ground and Fuyu was descending on her. Anko used 2 kunai to parry each of the descending blades, while on her back she kicked up and rolled backward. Her feet connected with Fuyu's torso and the jonin was flung backward a good dozen feet. In mid-air, Fuyu performed a kawarimi with debris next to Anko, who had been able to just get back onto her feet. Metal screamed against metal as Anko desperately tried to keep the dancing blades from her body. Her shoulder ached and blood loss would soon become a problem. With those problems, Anko had difficulty paying attention to the larger battle around her. The swirling melee she found herself in would be deadly if she made the tiniest of mistakes. Anko saw Komodo come to her aid and she ducked right as his Kaiten Jutsu burned through the air where her torso had been. Fuyu performed a near-instant kawarimi, but even with her speed her skin suffered burns. Anko whistled sharply, signaling the withdrawal. Anko left behind the unintelligent 2-headed snake to slow down the enemy. It didn't slow them down for long as Fuyu broke off her pursuit of Anko and climbed up the side of the snake. One of her blades were made from the same chakra-conductive metal as Naruto's kunai, and when she reached the top of the snake she flooded her chakra into the tanto and pushed it straight through the scales and into the snake's brain. While Anko was wounded, she was happy to see the damage her squad had caused. More importantly was the fact that Kumo had finally taken the bait and were charging after. I didn't expect to be injured this early in the game, but I finally got them headed right to where I want them. Break. Danzo bowed his head to the fire daimyo. The feudal lord was a rational, even-tempered ruler, but one that was looking exceedingly nervous. Potentially 5,000 shinobi are threatening us and your Hokage only sends 40 in response. The fire daimyo's voice was steady, but there was a noticeable shake in his hand. Danzo responded, "It is unlikely that there are that many shinobi. Many will be simple soldiers." The fire daimyo fanned himself. He was not pleased with Konoha. He was the ruler of Hai no Kuni, surely he deserved more than 40 shinobi to augment his forces. In the capital he had 2,000 soldiers and could put weapons in the hands of another 2,000 civilians, though their worth would be questionable. He had his bodyguard of 12 shinobi, and if the city could hold out long enough, more soldiers could be summoned. 40. Is that truly all Jiraiya can spare? Hi. If you will grant me permission to coordinate the defense, I will not tire you with the details. The fire daimyo was not a fool. He knew very little about the practical applications of war. He had advisors for that sort of thing after all. And it would stress him terribly. And so he nodded in agreement and allowed Danzo to coordinate the defense efforts. Danzo quickly picked out the 2 men he needed to deal with. The general in charge of the armies of Hai no Kuni was an older man by the name of Katsuo Maki. He had been apprenticed in Tetsu no Kuni, Land of Iron, in his youth. He was no Mifune, but he had a solid grasp of military matters. The second man was head of the Shugonin Junichi, 12 Guardian Ninja. He was an Akamaki originally from Konoha who hadn't seen eye to eye with Choza regarding keeping Choji as heir to the Akamaki clan. His name was Chian. Katsuo armed some of the civilians. If any of the civilians are actually competent, add them to your regular units. Keep the worthless ones away, I'll have a use for them, but not if they are mixed in with our productive assets. Katsuo frowned at the callous implications but nodded his head. The fire daimyo had spoken. Chien, how many of the guardians are you willing to pull off of guarding the fire daimyo? Chien considered it and said, 6 will stay behind and guard him and the royal family. I will lead the others assisting you. Scour the town and search for any retired shinobi. Some squads may trickle in on their way back to Konoha. We will add them to your shinobi. Katsuo asked, how many shinobi can we expect the enemy to bring? 1 to 2,000 if my spies are reporting accurately. The old man almost choked. At a minimum 1,000 shinobi. We will be torn apart, we should flee instead. Danzo normally gave the impression of being feeble, but he had set aside his usual tactic. Instead he entered the general's personal space and softly spoke, the Hokage has entrusted me with the defense of this city. I will not fail. Katsuo was rarely intimidated, which made this moment all the worse for him. However, he was samurai trained and so he mastered the sudden fear that Danzo had created and roughly spoke, hi. Danzo dismissed them and considered the city's chances. If Sai and the others failed to bring back actionable intelligence, the city was probably doomed. If that was the case, he would ensure as many Kumo shinobi died regardless of the cost to the civilians. Break. Fuyu's blood was up. Her scouts had been mauled, tortured, executed and hit by truly twisted traps. Fuyu knew that the woman she was chasing was almost solely responsible. Anko Mitarashi, one-time apprentice to Orochimaru the Snake Sannin. She specialized in torture, interrogation, infiltration, trap-making and assassination. Fuyu was determined to rid the world of such a twisted individual. Fuyu was no stranger to assassination, but torture disgusted her. It was uncivilized and reeked of an era of barbarity that should have ended. Fuyu's keen senses knew she was heading into a trap. At her signal, her forces put up a genjutsu to mask their movements, and then she summoned a lightning clone while others brought up their own clones. The clones then advanced ahead and charged into hell. Sure enough, traps were sprung, kunai were launched, pits opened up and toxic fumes rose from the ground. Buried explosive seals added to the chaos. At the cost of chakra, a death trap that would have killed potentially scores of shinobi was neutralized. Fuyu signaled her troops to advance slowly and more cautiously. Fuyu had received word that help was on the way, so she could afford to be patient. She allowed one of the medical nin time to heal some of the burns on her face. Mitarashi had made a mockery of her reconnaissance specialists and she had every intention of killing her the next time they met. Break. Anko muttered a curse. She had been certain they were going to charge in. Fighting a pitched battle wasn't going to work. They needed to circle around and hit other targets. The enemy commander in front of her wasn't going to fall for her tricks, so she needed to find softer targets. She met up with Iruka and his relief squad. He was concerned about her shoulder and so she let him fuss over it. A sturdy bandage was attached and she took a plasma pill that replenished her blood levels. A soldier pill was down next and helped her recover some of her chakra. While he was working on her shoulder, Iruka said, 2 of our Anbu pairs haven't reported in yet. Anko grimaced, damn it. We are bleeding resources. I lost one in the last fight. What happened? Someone good is hunting them. We won't be able to slow them down unless we take care of their hunters. Iruka looked troubled as he explained this. I don't think this is going to work, Anko-chan. Kumogakure has some of their best on the field. It might be better to fall back and see if we can be used in the defense of Konoha. Anko looked at her husband coolly. No, we haven't completed the mission. Iruka replied, Jiraiya-sama told us this wasn't a suicide mission. We've lost 6 Anbu and paid them back 20-fold for it. We haven't slowed them down significantly, but their wariness will slow them down all the way to the village. Konoha's snake mistress wasn't about to admit defeat yet. She still had a few tricks to play and she understood the importance of slowing the invasion. Their best combat team was assisting Takagakure. If Kakashi's team was back in Konoha, then she would have gladly agreed with Iruka and returned. But without them she wasn't certain of victory even with the likes of Jiraiya, Tsunade and Guy. If she could stall the enemy long enough, it might give Team 7 a chance to make it back in time for the battle. I've been command of this mission, Iruka. We aren't done yet. Iruka looked incredibly frustrated with the decision but nodded his head. Komodo looked to Anko. What's the play, Commander? That will be it for this video. If you want more, comment down below, like, subscribe. And see you guys later.